Thank you. Thank you for having me. First of all, it's bright and early morning. I had to get up like what 4:45 this morning in order to get my run in so that I'm ready for the keynote. So that's sort of how all my mornings start usually. Getting a early morning run. That's where a lot of thinking happens. That's where a lot of podcast listening happens. And I really encourage people, to live a healthy lifestyle. That's something that I fundamentally believe in. And talking about the fun element, for last 10 years, I've grown a handlebar every November, which is No Shave November. I've grown a handlebar to promote that healthy lifestyle among men. How we all need to take care of men in our life, whether you're a man yourself or there is a man in your life, brother, partner, father, son, friend, colleague. Make sure they're getting their annual health checkup done. Make sure they are getting a good meal. And one of the big things that I want to promote about is never worry alone. If you ever have a worry, talk to somebody. And that's really a big deal that I would like to encourage and promote everybody. So yeah, I think I'm really big believer in living a healthy lifestyle, and encourage everybody to do the same as well. So let me get started here. Thank you, Umair, for that introduction. Um, I've been involved with the CNCF community for about 6.5 years now. Back at Amazon, actually almost 7 years now. Back at Amazon, when I was at Amazon, along with Kapil, now we joined around about the same time as well. So um, my first question to the management was like, why are we not part of CNCF? I was like, oh yeah, we should be part of CNCF. And that's how I happen to make Amazon join Cloud Native Computing Foundation. And 3 years later, when I realized, you know what, I want to do something more fun, I put my resignation in. And the funny story over there is, I think after my manager Kapil was the first person that I talked about, that Kapil, I'm leaving, and his immediate reaction was like, "Dang it, you beat me by a few days." And Kapil also resigned a few weeks after I resigned, and that kind of sort of led to the genesis of Stacklet. So I'm really happy and proud of all of our quote unquote hallway conversations, because we're both remote and virtual, how all of those hallway conversations has come about to this big and massive community around cloud custodian, and particularly with the Stacklet component of it. I think it's pretty amazing. So I'm going to go ahead, share my screen here. Is my screen available?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah. So as I said, I've been with Intel for over for about couple of years now. I'm the vice president and general manager of Open Ecosystem at Intel. Prior to that, I've spent number of years at Apple and Amazon, taking them through a cultural change on how to bring that open source as part of the inherent culture, essentially. Back in 2011, Mark Andreessen, wrote this article called as "Software is Eating the World." And the quote from that article was that how a dozen or so new internet companies like Facebook and Twitter at that time, 2011, are sparking controversy in Silicon Valley due to their rapidly growing private market valuations and even the occasional successful IPO. So that was back in 2011, because hardware was sort of the dominant theme around that time. But then slowly software was kind of sort of taking over everything else. But then 2022, about a decade later, Jim Zamlin, who's the executive director for the Linux Foundation, says, hey, most of their software is open source. And as you will realize, you folks are living that world. As you will realize, the open source is indeed the norm. And one of the interesting statistics that just came out literally last week by Harvard Business School, Frank Nagel, who's a wonderful professor who talks about open source at HBS, he wrote this paper called as the value of open source software. And so basically what he did is he estimated the supply side by calculating the cost to recreate the most widely used OSS ones, Linux, Kubernetes, Java, etc. Then they calculated the demand side value based on a replacement value for each firm that uses a software, and they would have to build it internally if OSS did not exist. So the supply side value was a little over $4 billion. But what's staggering is that the demand side value is $8.8 trillion. They also found that firms would need to spend 3.5 times more on software than they currently do if open source did not exist. And as a matter of fact, when I was at Apple, when we were talking to the management, that's what we would tell them, that imagine a project like Kubernetes, which has what, over 80,000 developers from 5,000 plus companies with over millions of commits. We cannot match that engineering capacity. So that's the important element. And one of the interesting statistics is 96% of demand side value is created by 5% of OSS developers. So that's basically what led to the term of, which I'm going to explain in a second, open source billionaire philanthropists. Another one that is important to understand why open source is relevant. Synopsys is a chip design company, verification, IP integration, software security, quality testing. Excuse me. They provide an annual report around open source security and risk analysis. In their 2023 report, which is their eighth edition of the report, they examined the result of more than 1,700 commercial code bases that is performed by Black Duck Audit Services team. 96% of the code bases contained open source. And the last statistics probably that is relevant here is, state of open source that is produced by OpenLogic for the last several years, and this time also in association with OSI and Eclipse Foundation, that just came out a couple of weeks ago as well. It says 95% of the orgs either increased or maintained their use of open source in 2023. So open source is very well here to stay. And I don't think I need to be convincing this particular audience on the relevance and impact of it, but this is the phrase that I was talking about. Again, Jim Zamlin, executive director of the Linux Foundation, sends out a weekly newsletter to the LF board. I am Intel's alternate representative to the Linux Foundation board. And there he coined the term open source billionaire philanthropist. He talks about how these maintainers are personally contributing billions of dollars in business value, like the Linux maintainers that are contributing work over there, and the amount of revenue that is generated by all of these operating system vendors that are selling commercial distribution is massive. But these are rarefied kind of billionaires because they don't have a mega yachts. Now, setting up that context that open source is critical, open source is relevant, open source is essential. Back in 2022, this is, I believe, KubeCon Valencia. Now, as part of CNCF, we do these regular CTO summits that we have started doing for the last couple of years. Now, at KubeCon, we bring the CTOs from the end user companies, and we bring them on topics that matter to them. So back in Europe 2022, the topic was resiliency in multi-cloud. And what they said is that the multi-cloud resiliency really means avoiding or mitigating an adverse event's impact and being ready for unexpected outcomes. A cloud could go down, a region could go down, an availability zone could go down, all of that could happen. Achieving that resiliency really requires different approaches than those are within a single cloud, no cloud, or even hybrid environments. And the point that was called out over there was that finding a path to federate multi-cloud architectures is a growing concern for many organizations. That particular summit had 21 participants from 6 business verticals, diverse industry sectors functions like aeronautics, automotive, semiconductor, insurance, healthcare, business, social media, audio streaming. So all of these sectors were very well represented over there. And if you download the result report, which there's a link at the bottom of the screen, it says 90% enterprises have a multi-cloud strategy. As much as a cloud vendor would like to sell you on that, oh, we have all the regions, availability zones, and services, etc., etc., from an end user perspective, which is where the truth is, the idea is 90% of enterprises have a multi-cloud strategy. And with that as a basis, they all agree it's a significant challenge on how do you adopt that multi-cloud strategy. Something of direct relevance to the audience here is how they talk about use standards and governance as framework without limiting innovation. If you have a multi-cloud strategy, you can't be using one cloud service provider's framework and then learn another cloud service provider framework and another one, because they all have their own nuances, different languages, different domains, different topologies. So you really need a framework which really does not become an inhibiting factor for you. And then another key, these are both, by the way, quotes from the study, which says the importance of governance with multi-cloud is much higher. Governance could be at many different levels. And you folks are deep into cloud custodian, so you know exactly what kind of governance is relevant from your perspective, and we'll touch some of those. Just to kind of give a little bit more context, Greg Lavender, who's the CTO of Intel, which is where I work, he always talks about the best way for developers to solve the world's problems is through an open ecosystem that supports their needs. If we were to solve a global problem, we really need that global collaboration as opposed to one vendor defining what that needs to be done. Openness creates a horizontal playing field where innovation truly, truly thrives. So why open matters in cloud specifically? There are many reasons why people adopt open source, and many studies have been done on that part of it. But specifically in the cloud, your innovation should not be restricted or defined by a CSP in their regions, right? What their regions are, what their availability zones are, none of that should really restrict it. No vendor lock-in, is super important. You should not be at the mercy of a single CSP. Embracing open source provides organizations with the autonomy to select from a diverse range of solutions where you're free from a constraint of a single vendor choices. Like whatever that vendor provides is what I'm going to restrict it with. But if you're completely open, you're using Kubernetes as a compute layer, so potentially you can migrate across cloud. Again, potentially. This independence empowers organizations to tailor decisions that are very specific to their requirements, circumventing limitations that are imposed by a single vendor. Okay, so that's an important element. So faster innovation, the depth, the breadth, the diversity of the solutions that you get by keeping it open, the diversity of perspectives, the diversity of viewpoints, the diversity of needs, all of that is super important. The other important element is sometimes services, like let's take example for AWS. Services are launched in AWS and AWS config may not be ready or provide support right away. But given the cloud custodian community and that pluggable elements, pluggable modules that you can provide, somebody may have provided a patch because they care about it. So the iterative and the collaborative development, again, restricted by AWS to provide you support in AWS config or CloudFormation. Somebody here in the cloud custodian community could have already contributed that module, and it allows you to move faster. Open also allows diversity of users who want to scratch their itch and solve that one problem that matters to them and iteratively makes the platform that much better. We've all heard of Linus's law. Given enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow. This law emphasizes the power of community-driven collaboration and peer reviews and how easy it is to find the bug and security vulnerabilities. It is an equally and valid concern for the federal government, because of which CISA actually, or Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency released open source software security roadmap, and driving visibility into open source software usages and risks, hardening the open source ecosystem. All of that are critical elements of that software security roadmap. And last but not the least, just because of the fact that it is open, the scale of how widely it is tested, the scale at which it is tested is unimaginable. Think about Kubernetes again. Kubernetes is a massive project and used in all different industries, whether it's edge, whether it's in the cloud, whether it's in the client, whether it's in the aeronautics, whether it's in the telecom. And just by the virtue of being open source, people are able to contribute their itch that this is my use case. They're able to test it in their scale, in their constrained environment, air gap environments, whatever it is. So that's where open really matters in the cloud. Now, as you are looking at multi-cloud, there are definite challenges in multi-cloud fleet management. So let me talk about some of those. So as you are doing the multi-cloud fleet management, ensuring consistency in governance policies across multiple cloud providers can be very challenging. Um, Policies could be related to security, compliance, and cost, and they all need to be defined and enforced uniformly to maintain a cohesive governance framework. So that consistency is very important. Now, implementing consistent security measures and identity management practices across multiple cloud providers is crucial. You need to make sure that whatever the policies are, for security cost, like they're not going out of control. And again, because it's a multi-cloud fleet management, you need to learn those different languages. That's where open matters in the cloud. Developing and enforcing consistent cost management and budget controls across different CSPs is super important. Without proper governance, cost overruns may occur due to varying pricing models, leading to financial inefficiencies. I don't know of any CIOs who are happy with the cost overruns. Catching them early is super critical. And last but not the least, really creating and maintaining audit trails and compliance reports across a multi-cloud government, across a multi-cloud environment is critical for demonstrating adherence to governance standards. And finally, when you're running at scale, at a massive scale, multi-cloud fleet management, hundreds of thousands of nodes running across, spinning up and down, day in, day out, second in and out, automation is key. And that's exactly where Cloud Custodian provides flexible workloads. It's just a YAML to create the workflow, nested policy. Everything goes smooth, only the exceptions are notified. So let me come to the last slide here. Cloud Custodian is really solving these real challenges, which are multi-fleet, multi-policy, multi-cloud, etc. So choose an open source based tool that allows you to innovate faster, iterate collaboratively, serve your needs before by without being restricted by one cloud vendor. Use cases that are relevant, very relevant today: cost and compliance. And instead of somebody manually looking at the dashboard, use them as a code. Use that automation as that element that allows you to be extremely successful and be able to move forward. Because without automation, without that exception or the only ones notified, if it's autopilot is just moving smooth, is a critical element. And the beauty of Cloud Custodian really is how the grow project has grown over the years. The I know Cloud Custodian is incubation project right now, and the beauty of the project is the diversity of the maintainer is the element that I really enjoy the most here. As a CNCF, as a second time elected governing board chair of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, I often get engaged in technical discussions sometimes, although I'm not allowed to, but I do engage in technical discussions. But this is the element that I enjoy the most: the diversity of the maintainer and the diversity of the company. So that whole contributor diversity is what makes the project rich. So hopefully you got a element that the why open matters in general, why it matters in the cloud, and how cloud custodians specifically kind of serve that niche for you. Thank you. Any questions? I'm happy to take it.